Coming up on the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, Edgar and I will get you all of your latest news and information from Sacramento and from Washington, D.C. today. Plus, we are taking your questions on immigration, undocumented students, and what is happening with the federal funding freeze. A lot of information to pass along to you.
The ACSA Legislative Lunch Break starts now.
Seven minutes after 1 o'clock. Thank you very much for your patience today. Welcome to the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, along with Dr. Edgar Zazwata, ACSA's Executive Director. I'm Naj Ali-Khan, ACSA's Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome. We are honored to have you here today. Go ahead and jump onto the chat. I know many of you already have. Say hello and let us know where you're watching from today. Edgar and I and our two guests are on location in Monterey today, Edgar. That has not taken us away one bit from all of this news that is going on.
Well, two thoughts right off the bat, Naj. One, I appreciate that people were actually wondering if we were live or not. It'd be sad if we went live and nobody even notices whether we're on or not. So it looks like people are watching. So that's good. Even if apologies that we were a few minutes late. And then two, as you mentioned, yes, here we're in Monterey for our superintendent's symposium, and we're in a beautiful hotel here, the Portola Hotel, and we're in the conference room. But one nitpick here: we're in Monterey. Can you give it like Pebble Beach some background? We couldn't have done this on location there on some of the most beautiful parts of our state. No disrespect to this beautiful hotel, but we're steps away from
something tells me this would not have been the right environment for us to be.
I will say it. I think they deserve a shout out. I know Michael Kelly was running around like with his head cut off right now, trying to make this work from a technical standpoint. I know Gianna has been working very hard behind the scenes. I know we just jump on here and try to say things, sometimes smart, sometimes not, but they're working pretty hard there behind the scenes to make this happen. So I appreciate their efforts.
Folks, if we only had the time and opportunity to be able to show you exactly what was going on for us to be able to get this show on. But for the very first time, Edgar and I are right next to each other. Literally, there's an air wall in between us as we do this, and just a hallway in between our two guests. So this is going to be interesting as I'm hearing Edgar talk 5 seconds ahead because you're right next to me. So that's
my hearing's not that great, so I cannot hear you.
All right.
I'm just choosing not to hear you, Naj, which might not be an exception either. So
that's fine. So we're going to talk about the federal funding freeze. We're going to talk about undocumented students. Go ahead and start putting in your questions because we are going to go through a lot of those topics today, Edgar. I do want to mention we do have some breaking news this morning. And I'm going to read this right from the story on NBC. It says President Trump is expected to sign a sweeping executive order today that would prioritize and free up federal funding to expand school choice programs. That's according to two sources familiar with the plan. The order is expected, to impact several federal departments, including the Department of Education, directing it to prioritize school choice programs through its discretionary grants and issue guidance to states about federal allocations to districts and schools, according to a senior White House official. So that breaking news today, as reported by NBC News. Edgar, I'll give you another federal story for us, and this is regard to the federal funding freeze and the lack of clarity and transparency that came about with this. Now, we got this memo that came out of OMB talking about the federal funding freeze, but because there was a lack of clarity, we did not know about which programs would be impacted, whether the impact would be on Title I, IDEA, Head Start, school meals. A second memo with clarification came out yesterday afternoon. A federal judge then froze the freeze, and now, and that's when we made a statement. We'll go ahead and we'll pop that up for you. The statement we released yesterday on social media, but now we are hearing today. There's the statement that we put out Quote, since the release of a memo by the Federal Office of Management and Budget outlining a federal funding freeze to several aid programs, ACSA has been working with federal partners and state leaders to assess the impact of actions by the Trump administration on California students. I'm going to go ahead and just move on, because we had an interview with Rob Bonta, our state attorney general, who reflected on this federal funding freeze.
Congress, not the executive branch, not the president, has the power of the purse, the power to spend, the power to appropriate, and decisions have been made. Budget bills have been signed into law, not vetoed, and decisions made about appropriations. The president, with one stroke of the pen, cannot stop that. He had an inauguration, not a coronation. He is a president, not a king. He has lots of authority, but it's not unlimited.
Okay, so that was Rob Bonta talking about the federal funding freeze. Edgar, just, those two stories that happened, honestly, within the last 24 to 36 hours. Your thoughts on both of those?
Wow. Well, it's, talk about, we were just reflecting on this, right? It's been quite a couple of weeks, right? Not to we're talking about the federal front, and you think about just everything our schools have been dealing with here in some parts of the state, the fires before that. It's just, there's a lot going on. I think yesterday was case in point, Naj, and I know we were going through this exercise. We were rushing, and we appreciate, so we were getting a lot of inquiries. I know some of our viewers here about trying to make sense of what was going on with the memos from OMB. We're rushing to get answers. We're in communication with our Department of Ed. We're in communication with our federal advocates. We were about to put out an initial statement. Then we get word that this is getting clawed back. Then the courts jump in. All this to say, I think and we say this a lot, and I know it gets cliche, we're gonna be forced to, as you always remind me, Naj, I like to say, we're gonna have to take a pause. We're gonna have to take a breath, right? Because the one piece that I think is more detrimental, sometimes I would even say, and we'll have our attorneys jump on about what's the real impact, both on the immigration issue. Sometimes it's the noise and the disruption that, even if nothing happens, right? Going to the immigration issue. I mean, I was talking to one of our superintendents here at the conference that a viral picture went forward about some law enforcement action. Right away, people assume it's ICE. That took a life of its own, caused a huge disruption down in Southern California. It ended up, not, as far as I know, not being ICE. But it's just like the stress level for our schools, for our leaders, is very high. I think we're trying to do what we can to parse out what is real, what is noise, what is folks need to respond to. And that's our commitment. And this is always good. This is going to be messy in ways, like, as a few folks have mentioned this to me, it's somewhat like those early days of the pandemic where we just had new things coming towards us every single day. And I think that's part of the challenge there. And we may have lost Naj there, but as he comes back, and this is always my worst nightmare when I have to pick up and be the host, but I'm sure he'll find his way back in. But why don't we go to our guests and just jump into this conversation as a follow-up? I think last week we got such a great response in terms of the subject matters. So we wanted to bring two friends back. Namita Brown, partner with F3 Law. Alejandra León, also partner with F3 Law. Both very versed in this subject matter, and we thought let's do a repeat, just given the amount of inquiries that we got on this topic. Also, hopefully, able to get some resources out that I know our friends there at F3 have helped us with. Well, Namita, as always, I know frequent guests here now to the Legislative Lunch Break. It usually means that there's a lot of things challenging our members, right? When we see Namita coming on, but we're really grateful for you, your partnership, the firm's partnership. Let's start on that subject that Naj was just talking about, the OMB action. There's a hearing in federal court next week. Okay, there was inquiries about federal funds, what's going to happen, yes or no. Just bring us up to speed and maybe try to bring a little bit of clarity on what our folks need to pay attention to now.
Okay, so the interesting thing, the way Naj talked about it, was that it was freezing the freeze, right, or unfreezing the freeze. 23 states were talking about suing the Trump administration for freezing the federal funds. And breaking news yesterday, as you know, the federal judge put a stop on it, granted a temporary restraining order, basically saying you can't freeze these funds. And today, within the past 45 minutes, the breaking news is that the OMB has actually rescinded the memo that froze all these federal programs and federal funds for our clients. So as of right now, there is no freeze in effect. Now, that is not to say that there are not going to be more opportunities to limit use of federal funds or try to take over some control by the Trump administration, but there are processes for it. And I want to remind people, this is not new. This is what has happened during the Nixon administration. There was a stalemate between the president's office and Congress, and that case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. So stay tuned, but as of right now, OMB has rescinded its memo.
Namita, let me ask you about another question, and I think Naj is going to jump back in here. So, do you foresee this ending up back into the Supreme Court, or what do you think just on the legal front? What may happen next?
So this is like what first-year law students learn about, the three branches of government and the authority each branch has. So really funding is, the funding pieces of this are so critical. Can a president go in with an executive order and sign away monies that have been appropriated to various districts and various programs, and I'm speaking purely from an education perspective? Can that be done by a stroke of pen? So yes, I think there is going to be a constitutional showdown. I think that word has been, or that phrase has been overused a lot, but I do think that eventually we will see a showdown between the various branches of government around authority and the president's authority and the congressional authority.
And folks, I want to remind you, if you do have questions for either of our experts, go ahead and put those into the chat. We'll and try and tackle some of those in the back half of the show. Alejandra, let me ask you about the political noise, because there's been a lot of it, especially about how districts should conduct the day-to-day activities, the day-to-day business. But we're hearing from your team that the day-to-day is not necessarily changing. Can you clarify that?
That's right, Naj. From our perspective, state law really hasn't changed. And what state law really governs is your day-to-day running of your instructional day. Your front office is not open to anybody. Beyond the front office, it's not open for visitors to just walk onto campus. So, your procedures to monitor and receive and register visitors is still the same. I know school districts or clients frequently interact with law enforcement, whether it's more likely your local law enforcement, but with immigration law enforcement, we would do a similar procedure of documenting their name, their badge information, their purpose for the visit, and determining how to get them the information they are asking for, as long as it is properly authorized. And so, Naj, day-to-day instructional administration of a school day in public schools remains largely unchanged. And I encourage school districts to remember, you do this very well all the time in terms of making sure that your front office remains inviting to visitors, but also consistent with ensuring your obligation to maintain student privacy, maintain your students' safe learning space environment. That really hasn't changed at all.
Namita, a little bit of a vocabulary check here, because there was a lot of terms that I know we were talking about this in an earlier session. We're hearing a couple of terms come out as relates to this immigration raid issue: that warrants, subpoenas, exigent circumstances. Can you just kind of explain that? Because I know we were getting a lot of questions last week. The chat was overwhelmed with folks wanting no clarity one over the other. What should they be looking for? So one, what does all this mean? And then two, just maybe a little advice on how to handle that piece of it as folks are stressing about what they should be looking out for.
Sure. So listen, as Alejandra said, the part that hasn't changed is that federal law has allowed for federal enforcement officers to come on school premises if they are doing federal enforcement action that is either dealing with a warrant that requires an exigent circumstance, access to a student, arrest warrant, or if they want to, do some kind of an investigation and have a judicial order. There are also subpoenas. So those are the three things that we talk about. So let me talk a little bit about each one of them. Exigent circumstances, what does that mean? That means federal law enforcement folks have a judicial warrant that is signed by a judge that says, we need access to this student because there is a investigation, a high stakes investigation that is timely, that has exigent circumstances attached to it that require us to get access to a student. Again, this is not something new that President Trump has signed. This has existed in California law and federal law for a long time. This is how sometimes your local PD folks get access to students. This is where there is threat, live threat, terroristic threat, people calling in, bomb threats sometimes. So when you have an exigent circumstance warrant, that requires the district to say, thank you, check and see whether or not the warrant is signed by a judge. You want to take a picture. You want to make sure you have the officer's name, the officer's warrant badge number. Send that information out to the district designated person who is going to be your law enforcement contact at the district office. And then you provide access to the students. And what does access look like? Access doesn't mean that the enforcement officer is going to storm with you throughout the school, trending and going past the multipurpose room and the kitchen and the food services area to the classroom to pull a kid out. Generally speaking, administrators will go and pull a kid out of class if there is a warrant that is appropriate and fully signed. So that exigent circumstance warrant basically means there is no time to waste. If it is properly executed, which is have a sign by a judge, it clearly states who the student is, identifies the student properly, and it says it's exigent circumstances, then you provide access and you bring the kid out. You will still do your parental notification. That is part of your law enforcement interaction policy that just about every district has. So nothing that we are doing with ICE falls beyond that law enforcement policy. It's just that you're going to apply it the same way you would apply if you had a warrant from your local PD or your sheriff's office. Then there is where you have a judicial order asking for information or asking for student access. Those are the situations where your front office should be taking an image, again, filling out the necessary information. And I do know that there are districts that actually have forms, law enforcement interaction forms, where they give it to law enforcement and say, fill it out. They fill it out. They write their names, they write the badge numbers, they write what is the authority that gets them there. And you basically take that and a copy of the document they have, and then again, interact with folks at the district office, the designated person. And there might be, a little more time leeway here. You may say that the district office personnel who's responsible for this is coming down. They're going to interact with you, officer, to facilitate what you are seeking. And again, this is a valid order, must be complied with, but it is not exigent circumstances. So you buy a little more time. And then there is the third one, which is your regular subpoena that is basically asking for information, and that doesn't have a time attachment assigned to it. You will see it on the order that it is not an exigent circumstances order, but rather it is a subpoena. And that allows you to say, thank you so much, officer. We are going to take this. We are going to give it to our district designated person. They will work with our legal counsel, and we will attempt to resolve this in a timely fashion in the best way possible. So that doesn't require immediate compliance. Now, the reality also is you are going to get certain officers that are going to try to push to get that information immediately. And that's why designating a person from the district office who does have the capital to deal with enforcement agents, whether they are federal enforcement agents like ICE or whether they are your local PD or the sheriff's office, someone who can actually discern the difference between the various orders, between the various documents, and then be able to guide the school secretary or the school office person to connect them with the district designated officer. That becomes really critical. But great resource is the Attorney General's website. They have copies of all these various documents. But I say this with a caveat. These are extraordinary times. The samples that are out there have existed as forms and documents have existed in the past. As we get into this uncharted time where there are new challenges, new push and pull between various branches of the government, forms may be different, orders may be different, and therefore you want someone who's viewing all of these various documents from the lens of the district interest, district liability, and you want to use the same person so that there is consistency and calibration to utilizing the same judgment irrespective of school site. And that's why designating one person becomes really critical.
That's how we got a question about example of a law enforcement interaction form, and you just noted that Namita, the AG's office, probably the best bet to go and see that.
And just to let you guys know, I did see that the question in from Tracy Unified, and our communications expert Ryan over in Arcadia Unified put in a question as well. So we'll try and get to those in just a couple of moments. Alejandra, tell us about the importance of signage right now, just in the schools and district office, and what that could mean for the protection of students, of staff, of teachers.
Certainly. So public school districts generally are seen as limited public forums, which means for all of us out there who are not so familiar with constitutional law, that it's not like a public square. It's not like a public park. You can't just come onto it at any time. It is limited because there are privacy protections and duties to keep students safe and limit classrooms from interruption so that instruction can go on. So limited, though, also means that the front office generally is seen as, and that's the public piece of it. Where signage comes into consideration in these times, and really at any time for any reason for student safety, we want to make sure that you are properly designated beyond what point in your front office is it no longer public, right? Is it, you want to put plants and signs and things that clearly mark to the public and anyone who's a visitor that beyond that point, they need authorization, right? And they need to register. And while they may have ability to roam, I'd say roam, but maybe that's not the right word, but to be in the front office and inquire about the public school district's business, that's fine. But the signage, it would really help your school district to mark clearly beyond this point, you are not authorized to access without, a school district administrator's consent, and that you have a legitimate purpose on campus.
Namita, I'll throw this next question for a viewer. Ryan asked about some districts are assuming that board policy will supersede what federal officials or law is saying. Is there a case that might be true, or what would you say in that situation in terms of that? People are confused about, okay, we have a board policy on this, but yet we're hearing all these things that maybe conflict coming from the feds. What can we say about that?
I'll give you the best answer I can give, which is it depends. I think that's not a decision you make in a vacuum. Depends on whether the language is more generous, the language is giving more rights, more protections, or if it's actually impeding or hindering the federal statute or the state law. So I don't think there is a blank answer, but generally speaking, immigration, and we are talking about immigration today, immigration falls within the purview of the federal government. Now, there are exceptional circumstances, new cases that are coming out that are giving more states' rights. So, for example, Texas, they started going to hospitals and asking for immigration status of people who were checking in way before the new administration was sworn in. So there might be states' right issues, but these are not general soundbite kind of questions and answers. I think it would really depend upon what the policy is. Look, at the end of the day, if your board policy is contrary to state or federal law, there are going to be challenges by interest groups, by parents, by students. And, we've seen that it's happening up and down the state on various things, whether it's, parental notification policies, whether it is sometimes issues around religious freedom. There were issues around COVID, when we were talking about the mask mandates. So the push and pull always exists. And I would think that even though immigration is a hot topic right now, it is going to be a very boring constitutional law analysis that is going to be based solely on precedents. So that is the best answer I can give you right now.
I don't know, Namita. You're talking about boring constitutional law. I mean, come on, that sounds so exciting. Let me just ask this question, and I'll have either one of you jump in on this. This comes in from Tracy Unified. Do the same rules and guidance apply to adult school students and also to staff?
So I'll take that on. So staff are generally permitted on premises because they are employees of the district. Now, you want to adhere to your visitor policy, not just for people who are who are parents or third parties, but also, when you have a cross-site articulation as part of your collaboration time. If you have a person visiting from another school site is going to go visit a master teacher at a particular site, you still want the visitor policy to be adhered to. And so I would say the signage and policies around visitors still apply to your professionals. They apply to adult school students and staff as well. Now, if the question is, if you have an adult student who is perhaps a undocumented student, or ICE wants to interrogate or arrest the student, I think the same methodology will apply. You generally don't take your enforcement officers, if it's your local PD, you are not going to take them through your classroom building to the second grade classroom so you can pull a kid out. You generally will pull a kid out and bring them into the office. So I would say with adult students, the same thing is going to apply. You are going to make sure that the private parts of your school, which are off limits from the public portion of the school, as you would designate by signage, is a undisrupted part, because that is part of your mandate to students, that you are providing them with a non-disruptive student experience. So you would bring them out rather than taking law enforcement in through your private areas of a school.
All right. Alejandra León and Namita Brown, both partners at F3 Law, have been great partners for us through all of this process. Thank you both so much for being with us today. I'm sure we're going to have a mountain of questions again. So stay tuned, and we'll have you back soon.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
And folks, we want to let you know that we had so many questions that came in at last week's show. So what we did was we took those questions, took them over to our friends over at F3 Law, and they've worked with us to put together an FAQ that is on our ACSA Resource Hub. It's a federal executive order on immigration, FAQs on the impact on schools. We're going to go ahead and put that into the chat so you can click on that link and take a look at those FAQs, or you can just go to the ACSA Resource Hub. We have a lot of immigration content on there. Edgar, I've got a lot to promote, but just want to get your general feedback on what you've heard from Namita and Alejandra about just kind of the execution, the day-to-day of what our school districts have to do and know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate with both of our attorney friends here, like they acknowledged what the challenges are for our folks in trying to answer these questions, not only for themselves, but from their communities or when parents are coming to them. And unfortunately, some of them are just not clear answers. As Namita said, sometimes it depends. But I do think that just I really would encourage folks to go in and take a look at those documents from F3. There's two of them, one that they did for us, one that they had put out to all of their clients and put it out for wide distribution. It does at least answer some of those fundamental things that you can help with your site administrators, with the folks on the ground, with your classified staff, to at least hopefully give some clarity about what are the steps that we should be taking in all of these hypothetical situations, should they arise. I mean, and I think the field collectively is just, we're hoping for the best, right? Like even with the action last week from the federal government, we hope that most of these interactions aren't going to take place on a school campus. But I think being prepared for that, while also kind of where we started this conversation, doing our best, and all the leaders, whether it be at the school site or the district level, to try to still communicate that sense of calm to our parents, to our communities, that schools, to the best of our ability, are still safe places for our parents, for our kids, and that we can see them as safe havens. I think is an important underlying piece here that we can't miss.
Yeah, and I do want to make sure that all of you know, because we've had hundreds of viewers on today. ACSA is committed to keeping all of you up to date on the latest information. As things happen, if they are breaking, we'll come on the air with the legislative lunch break and bring you details of anything that is taking place. Want to promote a couple of things for you as well. Rafael Placencia is our current ACSA president. He's been very vocal about mental health, and he talked about his journey just a few weeks ago with ACSA's Michael Kelly.
I wonder how his passing, Rafael, shaped your view on mental health and its importance in education.
He always said that ACSA is far bigger than a person. And we were so involved in ACSA, we wanted to advocate and champion our kids. And he was not only my wingman, he was my leader. Sometimes through pain, you find purpose. And I thought I was focused on what my calling was. But when that happened, when I lost my brother, I just became laser focused at that time. That's when I realized, I said, okay, we need to make sure that our administrators are taken care of, that they're taking care of themselves and that we're taking care of each other. And we need to really highlight that.
Yeah, I want to make sure that I qualify that comment, Edgar. So Rafael, our current president, social wellness, mental wellness for educators has been really a focus for him during his presidency. And it stems from the death of his brother. It was a suicide on a school campus. He was a school administrator, longtime ACSA member, and it has really created a path for Rafael to be able to talk about educator wellness. That full interview with him is now available on our ACSA YouTube page. We invite you to take a look at that. Edgar, this is something that
if I could just say a piece on that, Naj, just I think with Rafael, I mean, I think it and so powerful. Actually, it's the first time I had seen that clip. So I'm actually looking forward to going in and watching the full interview. Obviously, I've heard Rafael's story many times now, and then there was a time there, just the selflessness there, right, where this shortly after this tragedy in his family, Rafael considered maybe not going forward and seeking the presidency, but then this became his calling, right? That, like, for the reasons that he states there in the video, of trying to uplift this message about wellness, and it goes beyond what we typically think. Obviously, these are different circumstances, but I think this is why he in every occasion he has is talking about people taking care of themselves or taking care of other leaders because of what he has had and his family has faced, personally. So I appreciate Rafael for being vulnerable and being willing, able to share that story. As you could see, even in that clip, it's not easy for him, but he thinks in sharing that story, maybe he could open up some doors to others.
Yeah. So that interview available right now on the ACSA YouTube page. So take a look at that. It's a remarkable conversation between Michael and Raphael. Also want to tell you about our ACSA Leadership Assembly. It's coming up in February. It's an all virtual event, Edgar. February 13th. We go 9 until 12:30. There's a lot of the ACSA governance that you will get a chance to see. But we will also be having a sit down with Rob Bonta, the California Attorney General. This is a live event, and we invite all of you, ACSA members. You are obviously welcome to be there. Our communications experts that are watching the show today, everybody invited to attend the ACSA Virtual Leadership Assembly. That's February 13th, 2025. You can see a link for that in our comments and chat section. Edgar, we are rounding the hour here, closing in on 1:45. Again, I mean, it's busy. There's a lot going on. Things are changing on a daily basis. I always go back to what you say. Let's take a breath.
Yeah.
Because we kind of have to at this point.
It's interesting times that we're in, right? And our folks, again, those folks on the front line, our school officials, their teams who are having to be the ones sitting there and talking to families. I mean, I think this is why we're motivated to do our little part, right? To help folks just on those journeys. But I think just this reflection upon, regardless of where people are in the system, that they are in a unique place because they do have the ability to kind of set the tone, to try to reassure folks. And I think we got to stay the course, right? At the end of the day, as we said last week, every educator has this constitutional responsibility to educate every student that comes onto their doorstep, regardless of politics, regardless of shifting policies. And I think it's all of us as a system, right? And those of us that are here to try to support the system, we're going to try to channel all those efforts to just have folks, the educators on the ground, be able to serve that fundamental purpose.
All right, folks, thank you so much for being with us here on the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live and interactive Wednesdays here on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.